Welcome to MedTech Speed to Data, a KeyTech podcast. I'm your host, Andy Rogers, VP of Business Development at KeyTech. Each month, me and a KeyTecher are going to interview a MedTech leader and talk to them about the critical data-driven decisions they make in their programs. Hey everybody, welcome back to MedTech Speed to Data. I'm your host, Andy Rogers from KeyTech. Today we have Ryan Neely, co-founder and CEO of Skribe. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andy. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on. I know my colleague Lauren met you at a conference a couple weeks ago. Before we get going on our interview about Skribe, which is super interesting, I figured I'd throw you a curveball question. So looks like both you and I were former cross-country and track and field athletes, D1 athletes.
Awesome.
I saw on your LinkedIn. So my first question for you is, I assume you ran the mile or were a miler at some point. So I'm curious what your fastest mile or 1500 was back in the day.
Yeah, so that's great. I wasn't much for mid-D guy. I was always the longer distance type person, but I think the fastest I ever got was probably like a 4:18, something like that.
All right. Yeah, you got me. You got me by 7 seconds. So yeah, so I ran at Lafayette College and Patriot League and ran against, all the schools up in the Northeast and everything. So
Yeah.
Are you still running?
Yeah, definitely. I actually got kind of into trail running and ultra marathons in graduate school, and it just kind of kept going. So
Nice.
It's been kind of a lifelong hobby.
Cool.
How about yourself?
I'm pivoting more to 10,000 steps and maybe bike riding is more my speed these days, but trying to get back into more running.
Awesome.
But yeah, I'm sure that that experience had a lot to do maybe with, your area of expertise and what you're up to, these days. So Ryan, for our audience, just give us a little bit of background on, who you are, what led you in your career to kind of where you are today at Skribe. Then we'll get into what Skribe is.
Yeah. So, my background actually is in neuroscience. I studied neuroscience in undergraduate at Harvard, and then as my PhD at UC Berkeley. And specifically, I was focused on brain-computer interface technology. So essentially, brain implants that can control prosthetic devices, whether that be a computer or robotic arm, something like that. And that was kind of my entrance into medtech. Some of that technology we worked on turned into a neural implant company called IOTA Biosciences, and I kind of got my feet wet in the industry that way. And then I bounced around a little bit, did some drug discovery in oncology and a little bit in the kind of consumer wearable space. And then now just jumping right in, started my own company with Skribe, my two co-founders. So, and here we are.
Yeah. What wearable consumer products were you working on? I asked because I just joined the Whoop Nation, a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Like everyone else, it feels like.
I was working at a company called Elamine Technologies. It was a wearable headband that helps you fall asleep faster.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Like by imparting electrical energy to the brain, or like what was that modality? 'Cause we do a lot of bioelectronic work here, so I'm curious. Yeah.
It was a pretty interesting technology, actually. It was acoustic simulation, but based on real-time analysis of the phase of EEG signals. So, basically timing sound pulses at a particular phase of the EEG and using that to help you fall asleep faster.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm interested in driving sleep efficiency beyond like the basics of, dimming light and, setting a certain temperature in the room. So sure, falling asleep is a key part of that too. Getting to fall asleep quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's if you're interested in that, there's a great body of literature on acoustic simulation, specifically as it relates to slow wave sleep. So there's been a lot of people showing that you can kind of time these acoustic pulses with slow wave oscillations. You can enhance sleep depth and deep sleep duration. So pretty cool rabbit hole if you want to jump down it.
Yeah, I will. Thank you for that. Yeah, so congrats on, taking the leap really and co-founding your own company. So tell the audience about Skribe. What's the mission? And a little bit just about your product, maybe your co-founder, like how did you guys come up with the idea, all of that?
Yeah. So my two co-founders, Josh and Andrew, we were some of the first employees at IOTA building these kind of wireless neural implants. And, we were there really at the peak of this kind of bioelectronics, electroceuticals hype. And the idea was, let's put these tiny implants next to peripheral nerves so we can listen to and potentially modify activity going back and forth from the brain to these different organ systems. And that was an incredible experience. But I think we were also kind of confronted with this reality of implantable devices and the time it takes to really bring those to, fruition and bring them to market. And so Scribe really was born of this question about, can we non-invasively sense things that, typically require implants and do it in a way that, you know, we could build devices that people would actually wear for the long term. Compliance is huge. So we came up with this technology of delivering energy across the body surface so that the actual sensor doesn't require a battery. You could kind of place it anywhere. Like if you want to know what's happening in your gut, you can put it on your abdomen. It's not going to be bulky. And then we kind of narrowed down to a really specific application, which is what we're doing today. And that is detecting cardiotoxicity for cancer patients who are undergoing treatments like anthracyclines and HER2 therapies that are, need close monitoring of heart health because they can cause problems for survivors. And that's really what we're doing today. We have a patch that can be worn to detect cardiotoxicity for these cancer patients and really streamline, monitoring of heart health and making sure that there are no delays in cancer treatment, related to things like that.
That's amazing. So the application is the intent that it's used only during the therapy, or like just so that you
Yeah.
titrate appropriately, or get them in to intervene, or does it work beyond when the therapy has been applied?
Yeah, all of the above. I think initially, I'm sure you can appreciate this. We want to start with something that doctors care about right now, which is changes in left ventricular ejection fraction. So the way it works now is, rather than an oncologist sending a patient to go get a cardiac ultrasound, which, could take weeks, the patch can just be placed above the heart for about 5 minutes. And we record a bunch of different signals, pass it through an AI model, and then we can give them either a thumbs up or thumbs down, like this patient is good to go, they can start a new cycle, or maybe they require some follow up with cardiology.
Mm.
And that's the idea today. But long term, we want to use that data that we're collecting to do more predictive monitoring, so that we'll know weeks in advance if there's going to be an issue.
Mm.
But as you know, you kind of have to take this stepping stone approach.
Right. So it is only worn temporarily. It's not a
That's right.
continuous. Yeah. I'm sure that makes the
Yeah.
product design and packaging and user experience much simpler. So I think that's a good
Yeah.
strategy. And is the idea that, forgive me, like it's kind of all packaged into one, so you don't have to like connect a bunch of different things. You're more or less getting an equivalent clinical signal that you can get from other means, but it's just the packaging and the usability of it is the advantage of Scribe.
Yeah, for sure. I
Okay.
mean, the first device that we're building is intended to be used in the clinic by, for example, a nurse or a medical assistant. So basically, you could put it on as you're waiting for the doctor to come
Mhm.
into the exam room. It measures the signals, and then it actually has a little screen on it that gives the readout. And by the time the doctor's there, you've got your answer, and they know what they need to know.
Very cool. So you mentioned there's two other co-founders. Just for our audience, we do get a lot of entrepreneurs and like intrapreneurs, like execs and leaders at these global companies. Just talk a little bit more about your team, right? So is it just the
Yeah.
three of you, or how old is the company, and kind of where are you at right now, and maybe who are your first hires or contractors, kind of you've been working with? Just bring that to life a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, the company is just us three for now.
Okay.
We really got going, I would say, March of 2025. So only about a year and a half old. But, the advantage of working in wearable devices and non invasive devices is that you can really get going quickly.
Right.
And, we've got a clinical prototype and we've started a clinical trial. We're about 200 something patients completed that trial out of about 500. So, really we're up and running. We are working with some contractors to
Mhm.
help with the kind of mechanical design.
Right.
That's not something we have expertise in, but yeah, I mean, it's been pretty incredible how far we were able to get, just the three of us so far, which has been exciting.
Yeah, the triumvirate there. All right, so
Yeah,
the podcast is called Speed to Data, right? So let's get into your data story, and we like to segment the episodes into sort of early days, which was a calendar year or maybe a little bit longer ago, to
yeah.
kind of current, where are you at, and then in the future. So early on, I guess maybe my first question, if I may, is more on the market side. What data were you gave you the confidence that this type of product would be worth bringing into fruition? Was it like reimbursement information or usability
Mhm.
data? Like, I kind of, what aside from how it works, just talk about what data you were looking for early on to give you the confidence to start the venture.
Yeah, this is such a key question. So initially, we had thought about heart failure, which is actually similar to what
Right.
happens in these patients with cardiotoxic drugs. But we were looking at heart failure more broadly, specifically looking at some of these implantable systems for monitoring heart failure and wondering if we could do that non invasively. So we started by talking to cardiologists and heart failure doctors. And the feedback we got was, we have so many tools, there's a whole cadre of
Hmm.
companies trying to do this for heart failure, and not, we're just not very excited about this. So we said, okay, back to the drawing board. What can we do? And because as I mentioned, I had some experience in cancer drug discovery, I was aware of this issue with cardiotoxicity. So we started looking into that problem as really a niche that we could solve an unmet need, and reached out to cardio oncologists. And these are either people with a cardiology or oncology background who kind of sit at this intersection between those two disciplines and really deal with this issue of how do you protect the heart health of people undergoing cancer treatment. And I think the key unlock for us was just talking to them and proposing this idea that we had of being able to measure left ventricular ejection fraction with a wearable device. And I think just the enthusiasm that they had around that idea was really what clicked for us. And we're like, okay, I think we have something here. These people who are experts in this field see the value,
Hmm.
and that was really our starting place.
Gotcha. And then let's talk about, clearly it has to drive, or trace from a need. So, what led you to, I assume, sort of an acoustic based measurement? What gave you the confidence that technically that was feasible?
Yeah, I mean, we so we had this advantage where the technology we had worked on in the past was essentially ultrasound energy transmission. So we had a strong background in acoustics, especially my co-founder Josh, who's an electrical engineer who had built these ultrasound based systems and really understood acoustics. And then
Mm.
it was really a matter of looking at what people had done in the past, in terms of academic literature and commercial technologies, and understanding what the capabilities were there. And then the next step was really just to build it ourselves and verify that we could do what we thought we could do.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what did that look like? For our audience, how did you stand up those prototypes? I mean, was it like Arduino and just sort of,
Yeah.
buying electronics off the shelf, or, just help us understand what those like early scrappy prototypes look like before the trial.
So my co-founder Josh is, like I said, the electrical engineer. He jokes that his apartment is a one bedroom, one lab apartment.
I
So he has a dedicated room where
love it.
he builds all these prototypes. And my other co-founder Andrew got 3D printer and was 3D printing the housing for the devices.
Mhm.
It was really a homegrown
Yeah.
operation. And in terms of what it looked like, initially started with kind of a breadboard approach, and maybe getting some printed circuit boards made, send out those designs, have them come back. And we've really just been iterating on that. I think more recently, we've started working with external design partners to kind
Mhm.
of speed up the PCBA process, and make that iteration more quick. But Yeah, it was really just a matter of putting things together in our respective dwellings and
Yeah.
testing them on ourselves and family members who we could corral.
That's what I
So
was gonna ask is, how did you actually test it would work? But that makes sense. All right, so let's pivot to, today. So a year after founding this company, you mentioned like clinical data. What do you mean by that? And what does that study look like? And what prototypes are you using? What pedigree of prototypes too?
yeah, how we got here is actually pretty interesting. So I think we came into this company with this notion that okay, we're going to be really scrappy and quick and build MVPs. And at the time, our idea was, we kind of need to stand up this whole operation where, we're going to build this wireless system and we're going to do a longitudinal study that's going to be like 6 months with our target population. And the capital requirement for doing that was pretty high, I think, for an early stage company. And there was a point where we were talking to one of our advisors who has experience in medtech, and he's like, "Look, guys, like this is great, but what I really want to see is can you build something, take a measurement, and show me that it looks like the standard of care, which is echocardiogram."
Mm.
And that really forced us to think like, maybe we don't need to stand up this whole production, and we can just 3D print something in our apartment and test it. And that's really what we started doing. And this is like an early prototype here. It's just 3D printed and has some sensors that we put in there. And we really rethought the clinical operation, which is let's just go sit in an echocardiogram lab, consent patients as they come in. They're coming in for an echocardiogram. It could be anybody. We'll ask them if they want to spend an extra 10 minutes to do our study, for a Amazon gift card, and we'll take data that way. And then we'll just, start comparing our outputs to, this gold standard. And that's really what the study looks like. It's just essentially all comers, they get an echocardiogram, we take our measurement and we just compare the two.
Is this under? I assume it's under like IRB and everything like that. Where is the study being conducted?
Yeah, of course. We have a central IRB. We're also working with the IRB at the institutions that we're working with. We have sites all over the place, actually. So we have some here in California. There are some private practice sites in places like Florida, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Louisiana. And then we're also working with academic institutions. So University of Rochester was our first site. And then we have a site in Thailand as well.
Mm.
So just all over the place.
Yeah. Ryan, not gonna lie, man, you're making this sound really easy. I know it's not easy, but it
Yeah.
seems like you've figured out a way to sort of navigate it in a way where like you captured the need, you have an enabling technology, you can stand up the prototype quickly, the trial is straightforward. I guess I have to ask, like looking into the future, then like what's the value? What data are you trying to communicate to, I guess prospective hospital systems buyers or, potential acquirers, or I don't know. What are you looking for to really communicate the value here? What data are you trying to
Yeah.
collect into the future? Because let's assume they're equivalent, right? Then is
Sure.
it literally just like a ease of use play and the packaging and kind of just ramping that up? Or, I guess just what are you kind of focused on going forward once you prove equivalence?
Yeah. So there are so many stakeholders that you have to please when you're building a medical device. And the value for patients, for example, is first of all early detection. So if you detect heart issues early, you can give patients heart failure medication like beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, and it will protect their long-term heart health without having to, take them off their cancer treatment, which is paramount.
Right.
So that that is one value that we're looking to prove out with a longitudinal study that will come down the pipe later. In terms of the providers, the benefit really is streamlining their workflow because now they have a patient come in, they're required to get echocardiograms or not echocardiograms, but at least some measurement of left ventricular ejection fraction
Mhm.
every few months while patients take the drugs. And those are really hard to schedule, even for some of these big academic institutions. It's like they're waiting weeks to get these things scheduled. They're having to delay treatment, which is not good. And so what we're giving them is a way to, basically take a measurement whenever they want. It could be scheduled. It could be because symptoms arise. It's like really eliminating that friction for them. And then the last piece here is kind of the financial side of things. And that's where I think we also have kind of a unique advantage, which is especially for these independent oncology clinics, this is something that they sort of outsource already to like a cardiologist or an imaging facility. And so there's no sort of source of revenue that we'd be cannibalizing. And so we've kind of identified a reimbursement play where, you know, there is a code that we would apply for, and then, you know, we're charging the clinic, for each use, but they're also getting reimbursed for, the test as well.
I
And
see.
so it's like an additional revenue stream for them while also being simpler and better for the patient. So it's kind of this like Goldilocks scenario,
Mhm.
I think that we've kind of stumbled into.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you were talking, I keep forgetting about the oncology piece, which is
Yeah.
worth talking about here for a second. You mentioned it's paramount that they stay on their therapies. I couldn't agree more. Is there a certain like type of therapy, type of patient, or are you picking one first for launch, or is it enough where you can kind of just say it's a blanket product for almost any patient in oncology? And I guess
Yeah.
if it's a blanket, why does it need to be oncology? It could really be sort of any patient, I suppose, right? Going in who needs this sort of interrogation before a procedure.
Yeah. So we're starting with really the highest risk patients. And so those are people taking anthracyclines like a doxorubicin or a HER2 targeted therapy.
Mhm,
And these drugs have like an FDA black box warning where you're required to monitor heart health for good reason.
mhm.
And those are really the starting points. In that population actually has just expanded quite a bit because of the recent approvals of antibody drug conjugates, basically HER2 combined with chemotherapy. So that's our target population, but as these therapies come on the market, they're getting better at treating cancer, but not really any less cardiotoxic. So there's a number of other things that we want to monitor in the future. Like if you look at immune checkpoint inhibitors, which is essentially given to almost half of all cancer patients today, they have a risk of myocarditis, and that needs to that's a really serious complication, and that needs to be monitored too. So we're starting with what is like the highest unmet need today. And then, once we have that clinical traction and doctors trust us, we can start to, work in some of these other drugs as well.
Mhm. What's the rough number of patients in these trials in the therapy itself? Is it hundreds of thousands, millions?
Yeah, it's about, that initial target population that I mentioned is about 600,000
Okay.
in the US. So it's a substantial number of people.
Yeah. One other question for you going into the future. I'd asked about, continuous wearable effectively. Are you
Yeah.
considering that, looking at that as you start thinking about hardware design? And does that open up other reimbursement for you?
Absolutely. So that really is the long-term vision.
Okay.
What we want to start with is, as I said, like this metric, this number that doctors know they need today, and that's what they want. But for the long term, what we really would like to do is start to build into this predictive monitoring approach where we can record longitudinal data, and instead of saying, oh, we seeing a drop in ejection fraction, you should potentially intervene. What we'd like to do is be able to say, hey, 2 weeks from now, there might be an issue. And so you can do something today that prevents, any drop at all. And that really comes with data. We'll collect longitudinal data. We have a plan of launching an at-home device that will really facilitate that kind of data collection. And so we're going to sort of build up to that as we scale.
Okay. Very good. Ryan, let's get into the lightning round. And I apologize. We sent over the script, and I think I'm going to probably keep up and maybe go off script a little bit more. So my first question for
Sounds
you,
great.
I mentioned the Whoop band.
Yeah.
I guess other wearables like friend or foe, right? as you look at your like ecosystem for patients going forward, do you consider them as like maybe a product, whether it's the ring or like the
Hmm.
Whoop or other Apple Watch? Like, could you tap into that, or do you kind of just say like that's great, but we need to just focus on our own what we're doing here as a company, friend or foe?
I would say friend. I really see what we're doing as kind of straddling two worlds. There is the Aura Ring, the Whoop Band,
Yeah.
these things that are really consumer first. And they're great and people love them. Obviously, they're very successful. What we found though is that if you talk to doctors, and I'm sure, people can corroborate this, if you bring your Whoop app into your cardiologist and you show her the data, she's going to say, that's nice. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that, I don't really
No
know
clinical
what to do with
relevance here.
this.
Yeah.
Exactly. But then on the other side, there are, certainly patches that people wear for arrhythmias. And those are very like solidly in the medical device. Like nobody's buying one of those to like wear around the house just for fun.
Like an iRhythm
And
patch or something like that. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And so what we want to do is really have that sort of form factor that these consumer devices have, but have the same sort of clinical impact as more these like, really dyed in the wool medical devices. And so we're really trying to bridge that with what we're doing. So it's something that, people are going to really connect with, but also, be actionable, for a doctor.
Cool. That reminds me. I have a college friend. He married a woman who was on the founding Stanford Biodesign
Oh,
project
cool.
for iRhythms. I'll have to introduce you guys after
That would be
this.
great.
Yeah,
That'd be
she might
great.
have some
Yeah.
insights for you. Yeah, I guess my next question for you is: we haven't talked about your funding. I imagine you're bootstrapping. Any advice for any other sort of like entrepreneurs that are starting wearable type venture? Any insights on fundraising?
Yeah. I mean, it's never easy. The first, I think that advice that we got initially, before we had raised money is like, what can you build in your bedroom essentially to start validating the idea. That was the best advice that we got, and we have raised a pre-seed round back in September. But before that, we were able to build a prototype and test it on ourselves, and file some IP based on that. And I think that was really the key to getting that first funding, because I think it can be, especially in a regulated industry like medical devices, it's like a little bit of a chicken and egg where people say, oh, we'd like to see some clinical validation. And you're thinking like, well, I don't have like $1 million to fund a clinical study. So,
Yeah.
how do I do this? So if you're working in a non-invasive device, especially, I think just think about any opportunity that you can have to test it. Even if it's like, you got to have like, even if it's like this big bulky thing that you can get some data from,
Mhm.
that you just have to start somewhere.
Have you fundraised? Like, where have you gotten investment from? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, so we did fundraise, pre-seed close like September of last year. That was about $1.6 million, and that's really funded our clinical development and additional prototypes. It looks way better than the
Yeah.
sold one, which is great.
Yeah.
It was kind of a mix of like smaller checks from angels, and then we had a few VCs that came in the round that were the bulk of the money.
Okay. Another question for you. I think your product is clearly clinically focused, but there are other wearables where I'm sure there are founders or people that listen to the podcast that are like, is it a wellness play or is it a clinical like device play? Any insights or thoughts on, considering going all wellness versus medical?
Are you asking like if
Not for Scribe, just generally
yeah,
speaking. Yeah, like a wearable device that could predict that you might have Alzheimer's, right? Or it could just be a
sure.
device that just tells you that you need to move, like more of a wellness play. Like, I guess I'll give you my answer. Like, wellness works, but you're going up against a lot of competition. It's faster to market and it's more of a higher volume kind of packaging and marketing play. Whereas
Yeah.
device, you've got all the hurdles that you're dealing with now from a trial to design under medical device design control. So just thoughts there.
Well, I would say, both are viable options, right? Both can be successful companies. I think it really comes down to playing to your strengths. So, for us coming from active implantables, it's like, we had kind of
That's
been,
your edge.
forged in the fire of like medical devices.
Mhm.
Although I have had some experience in the consumer wellness space, as I mentioned, when I was working with Elemind. And I think seeing those two things contrasted, it's like, on one hand, executing a medical device that's, going to be like a class two, class three is really difficult. The road is much longer. But I would say, the advantage is that, once you kind of get to that point, you've sort of figured everything out. You've got a code, you've got clearance, like
Mhm.
you are well established. The challenge with the kind of consumer side is, and you mentioned this, is it's really a matter of marketing and like getting your name out there. That's such a huge part of it. Like even if your device works well and it has, shows great information, if people aren't interested or you can't engage with those customers, so like you won't be successful.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I think I realized, working in that space is like your device has to work well, obviously, but at the same time, like if Taylor Swift like tweets out your device, like that's also a path to success, And
Mhm.
so there's really like these things you have to balance.
I did not have Taylor Swift on the podcast on my bingo card today, but yes. Very cool. Any other, just out of curiosity, heart disease is the leading killer in the US. Stepping back and looking at that market, do you see any other unmet needs? I mean, to me, the unmet need in cardiovascular disease is just earlier detection, right? It's like the silent
Yeah.
killer.
Yeah. I mean, even though I think cardiovascular is a crowded space, there's so much need there. And I think there are still places where, we or other companies can add value. One of the things we're really interested, for example, is peripartum cardiomyopathy. So
Hmm.
there's just complications with pregnancy that can really come out of nowhere and be really devastating. And then also for in the heart failure space, there is, heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. So this is much more difficult to detect, and you wouldn't even know sometimes from an echocardiogram that you have this issue. So those are some spaces where I think there's a lot of unmet need, and also just giving people information. Like I think this is where kind of the consumer wearables can be helpful. Is like if people are willing to kind of engage with them and
Hmm.
use that as a way to modify lifestyle factors. I think that could be really impactful as well.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, it's in the water out there in the Bay Area. So, congrats on
Yeah,
forming your own company and, it sounds like your buddies, so you're living the
yeah.
dream. I really wish you all the best, at Scribe and, thank you so much for coming on and, we'll have to stay in touch. And any other parting comments or anything?
If you ever are out here and you want to go for a run, I got some great trails.
All right.
So you just let me know. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah.
This has been a really fun conversation. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you. All right, everybody. Until next time, I'm Andy from Key Tech and MedTech Speed to Data. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for tuning in to MedTech Speed to Data, a Key Tech podcast. Join us each month for more ways to get the right data faster to inform critical decisions. Find additional resources on our website, keytechinc.com. If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe, and please leave a review on iTunes whenever you listen. Thanks.